Hello, welcome to the future of Israel and the Jewish people. And today we have a guest, and his guest is Roman Caggiano. Welcome, Roman.
Thanks, Pastor Harvey.
It's a pleasure to have you come today. Surprised, by the way, because we were supposed to have somebody else, and you showed up, and that's terrific. And I thank you for doing that very much.
Sure.
And since you are here, I have a couple of questions to ask you so the audience can know who you are, where you come from.
Absolutely.
Please, what your story says and belongs to. Well, you met someplace at Pivot Ministries, and from there, where did you come from?
Well, I mean, I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm at a very young age moved to Connecticut, and I was raised in Westport, Connecticut. So I went to all public schools in Westport. Went to Staples High School, and then I ended up going to boarding school in the end. But I moved out west. I lived in Arizona for about 10 years, and I moved back to Connecticut. Arizona got pretty lonely because I didn't have family out there.
Oh, I see.
I moved out there on my own, seeking the sun at a young age, But eventually, in the end, I wanted to be around family. It was pretty lonely out there.
What were you doing out there as far as job was concerned?
Well, for employment, I originally, my first job when I moved out there was in telemarketing. I was working at a company called ProMark One, and I eventually ended up working at another company called Dial America, and I was working at both of them, Dial America part-time and ProMark One full-time. It was tough work. There was a lot of stress in telemarketing. There was a lot of competition, and I have to tell you, I originally moved out to Arizona because it was actually as a result of coming out of drug rehabilitation.
Oh, I see.
That was, I went to drug rehab at a place called Arms Acres in Carmel, New York. And at the time I was 17. Actually, I remember I was 17 going on 18 because they were debating as to whether or not do we put Roman in the adolescent unit or do we put him in the adult unit, because he's right on the cusp of 17 and 18. And of course they decided to put me with the youth. They certainly weren't going to put me with the adults. Yeah, it was, it's one of those 30-day rehabs. It's very fast, and it was to no avail. There was no, it didn't produce any good fruit with me. A 30-day rehab. I moved out to Arizona after that, and I moved into a halfway house out there. That was where I originally.
Your own choice.
Yes, yeah, that was my own choice. They thought it would be a good idea, geographical relocation, in terms of staying clean, the separation from people, places, and things at the time, and it worked for a while. I came back to Connecticut for visits and things like that. As soon as I came back to Connecticut for visits, I have to say, coming back to the people, places, and things, I immediately fell into old habits. So there wasn't any long-lasting, long-term change.
So there was a change where you were, but there's not a change where you came back.
Yeah, it just when I came back for visits and things, I fell back into old behaviors and fell back into old,
Comfortability structure started to...
Yes, it deteriorated when I would come back and visit. And, it was... it just carried over.
So the word no was not in your vocabulary.
Not when I would when
Right.
I would come back. No,
Right.
it was. Yeah, it was very easy to fall back into old behaviors.
And when you came back, what happened after that? When you permanently came back?
Well, I remember moving back from Arizona. I remember it pretty vividly. You know, it was right after 9/11 occurred.
I see.
And I have to tell you, being all the way out in Arizona and watching 9/11 occur, I'll never forget it. First of all, I was in a very bad place in my life. Drugs had taken over my life, and I was living on the streets. I had become a slave to the drug. I had become a slave to cocaine. And I remember being in someone's home after I was basically in like a drug-induced state. It's almost blurry, but I can remember vividly seeing on the television the towers burning and the smoke coming up, and the chaos that was taking place. You know, it was on every channel. It was, you know, you guys remember. I don't have to tell you. You know, so. But all I could think was my family. You know, here I am, and my life is deteriorating, and I think my family is in great danger because my entire extended family, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, they all live in Brooklyn, Staten Island. You know, my uncle Gene has an office in Manhattan. My brother, of course, works in Manhattan. My cousin Jill. So all these people. And I feared for their lives so much, and I just couldn't possibly imagine, especially in my state of, you know, desperation, what it would be like to lose anyone. And I immediately called my father, and I was so sad and just so lonely and so fearful for them, and he immediately actually, you know, consoled me. He comforted me on the phone. He said, no, everybody's coming here to our house in Westport, Connecticut. You know, from the city. They're all coming here. They're all leaving the city. And I remember saying this to him. I remember saying, "Where's Marco? Where's Marco?" And he said, "No, he's here. He's okay." Because, you know, I love my brother so much, and I was so scared that something had happened to him because I know that he's in Manhattan daily.
Is that what made you come back?
Yeah, the thought of losing them and being left alone without them in the world, yeah, that fear definitely prompted me to move back to Connecticut.
And when you came back, what focus did you have about where to live, where to work, where to do anything as far as family was concerned? You knew you were coming back to them. But as far as anything else was concerned, you were on your own out there, so there you're going to be on your own here. What provisions have you made to be here?
Had I made?
Well, did you make when you were here? Because
Well,
obviously you came back, but you didn't come back just for the sake of coming back. You came back for a reason, the family, right?
yeah.
And then how did you intend to make a living or move or have an apartment or whatever?
You know, at the time, I hadn't thought about any of that. At the time, it was more so just the fear of being left in the world alone without.
In other words, the drugs made you feel that way.
You know, I don't know necessarily if it was the drugs or if it was just my emotional state. Whatever the case, I felt, you know, I felt very compelled to be with my family. It was just the fear of being left alone. Like, for example, I was all the way on the West Coast. You know, Arizona is a great distance from New York City.
Yes.
And Connecticut. Arizona was not under any attack. You know, there was no burning buildings. There was nothing exploding in Arizona when 9/11 took place. It was focused on New York City. And the belief at the time, you know, I mean, now this is many years after you and I are discussing this now. So what you have to remember is the discussions that were taking place that day. The discussions that were taking place that day were terrorists are attacking New York City, this is the end of New York City. You know, these are the discussions that were taking place then.
Right.
That everybody was scared that this is, you know, some place had attacked New York City, and they were attacking New York City. And New York City is going to be destroyed. These are the things that were being discussed. This was the panic. This was the fear. And I was hearing this, you know, all the way in Arizona, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, my whole family is going to be gone, and I'm going to be left all alone. So when the dust settled, and I think when the you know, the no-fly restrictions had been lifted, that's when I flew home. I didn't really have a plan, per se. Of course not. I had no plan while I was living in Arizona. I had no plan. My life had just spiraled out of control. So I just, yeah, I came back without a plan, and then I was going to go from there. I just wanted to be with my family. That was all I knew.
So you got a job, you started to do business, you were in business, you were in your own. Who did you work for? What did you do?
To be honest with you, thinking back to that moment in time when I had come back from Arizona, I was in my early 20s.
20s, sure.
I think I had got a job in a restaurant. I'm pretty sure I was, if I got the time frame correct, I was working in a restaurant called Tanga in Westport, Connecticut, which is still there. It's a sushi
And from
restaurant.
there?
You know, it was odd job after odd job. There was nothing concrete. Things, of course, inevitably spiraled out of control again because there was a lot of drug use, there was a lot of alcohol.
Still?
Oh yeah.
Now you came back to this area, New York, and again the drug took over.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
drug scene took over. After that, how did you get to Connecticut?
No, I was in Connecticut.
Oh, you were in
I
Connecticut.
had come back.
To Westport?
Yeah, Tanga Asian Bistro.
Okay.
That's in Westport, Connecticut.
All right. And now, how did you get to where we met?
Oh, where I met you was at Pivot, but that was certainly a little bit further down the road. There was a lot that led up to that. There was, you know, drugs led me to a life of deceit and crime, and I spent a lot of time in jail. And the last time I came out of jail is when I moved in with a woman who actually, we ended up living together for about 10 years. And we never had a documented marriage, but we referred to each other as husband and wife, and it was like what you call a common law marriage, which in Connecticut I don't think technically exists anymore. But that's what we called it. There was just never a piece of paper that said it. So when I met her, though, there was a change, because I had, in order for me to come out of prison for the last time, they wanted to put me on what's called house arrest, where you put
An ankle.
a bracelet on your ankle, and they monitor your movements and everything. And I had to find a place that would allow me to live there. And she was a friend before we were ever in a relationship. She was my friend for over 7 years before I asked her if I could move in with her on these terms. And she accepted me into her home, and there was she wanted me to move in, and she said, my home is your home, and be comfortable
Wonderful.
there. And she wanted me to be happy, and she suggested that that I do this, that I follow through with these rules, and she expressed that the opportunity for me to change my whole life around, is possible at this time with her. And now, today, from today back, that would be about 13, 14 years ago, is when this was happening. And I'll never forget, I was looking for a job. I moved in with her. She said, take your time, find a job, relax. She was very successful. She had a massage therapy practice that she ran right out of her home. She used to go to other people's homes, but she didn't like the carting of all the equipment around anymore, so she made an office in her home.
Good.
So the people would come to her, and she was very successful, very good at massage therapy, and she was always recognized in the Massage Therapy Journal, and she had awards for it, everything. She even consulted people about it. Other massage therapists would call her for advice. Jamie Lipsher was her name, and Jamie, I got a job online. I was looking for work online, and I found it difficult to get employed because of my criminal record. It was not easy. Places just they were just passing by my application, even with my qualifications. I had a lot of skills, and I came across. Jamie suggested. She said, "What about tree work? What about tree work?" And I said, "No." I said, "I never did that before." And she said, like dragging the brush when they cut the trees, and then you drag it to the wood chipper. And I thought, yeah. And I thought, well, I never did that before. And she said, well, I don't think they're gonna do a intense background check on that. So I gave it a shot, and the first tree service that popped up was Birch Tree Service. I'll never forget that. And I called Birch Tree Service, and I spoke with the guy on the phone for a little while, and I was just honest with him about my past. I said, let me just be honest with you, because I didn't want to talk about doing all this work and what I was going to get paid and what are the hours, and then in the end find out, well, you can't work for me anyway because of your criminal background. So I said, I'm just going to tell you up front. So I told him up front about my background with drugs and alcohol and crime, and he said, what's your name? And I said, Roman. And he said, Roman what? And I said, Roman Caggiano. And he said, it's me, Bert. And I said, I don't know any Bert, And he said, Roberto Porzio. We worked together at the Aero restaurant when we were younger.
Wow.
And I said, oh, Roberto. So you're talking about, this guy and we worked in a restaurant 15, 18 years prior to this conversation that we're having.
Wow, that's a long time.
He actually used to drive me to and from work at the restaurant when I was a kid. I was in high school, and he's a good guy, Roberto Porzio, and so now we had a few laughs, and boom, I started working for Bert. So we go back. We have history, and he has history with my mom, because he became her arborist.
Oh.
And So he also knew my parents for all those years. But I moved out west. He didn't. He stayed connected to them. And as he became an arborist and things like that, he ended up working for my mother. And they developed a very good relationship. So when I was working for him, he was paying me nicely and compensating me well. And at least in my opinion. But I came home after my first couple weeks working with Bert. I came home with a paycheck. And I showed it to Jamie, the woman I had moved in with, and Jamie looked at it. She said, "What is this?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "This is terrible what he's paying you." And I said, I gotta tell you, he's paying me better than he's paying the other guys who've been with him even longer." And she said, "But you're worth so much more than this." She said, with your skills and ability in landscaping and your background in that." And I said, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, he's definitely not going to pay me more than that. That's top dollar for what I'm doing. And she said, "You need to own your own business." And I had a lot of fears about that, you know. You got to get workman's compensation. You have to get a license. You have to get a tax identification number. You know, all the responsibility falls on the owner of any business. So I had a lot of fears about that. I had never even considered doing something like this. So in the end, what Jamie ended up saying was, listen, she told me, she said, "I owned my massage therapy business for 18 years. I'll take care of the accounting. I'll take care of making you an LLC.
Wonderful.
I'll get you a tax identification, all these things." She said, basically, she'll take care of the back of the house. She wanted me to go out and get the
customers,
get the customers, bid the jobs, do the work, and that's it. So I started doing that, and I was very successful at it. I was very successful in landscaping, and I was very successful with running my own business and generating accounts and bidding jobs, doing estimates, everything. It went really well. And I had really felt like I had overcome my difficulties.
All the addictions.
Yeah.
Good.
I really felt like I had overcome it. Not because I wasn't using things. I was drinking a lot. Jamie was a full-blown alcoholic. And I was drinking a lot with her. And there was, when we went on vacation, we'd always go on vacation for about 10 days in the Dominican Republic. And there was lots of drinking that took place there. And occasionally I would go out and do some drugs. Nothing long-term, nothing permanent, but I was dibbing and dabbing, you know, here and there where I could get away with it. And, you know, what ended up happening was Jamie died a tragic death from a combination of things.
Alcohol?
She had died of alcohol. From the drinking, in the end, killed her. She also had a brain tumor, a cancerous brain tumor that, you know, didn't contribute it to in a positive way, certainly. So, but it was the alcohol that killed her in the end. So when I lost her, it was really devastating. You know, I was successful with her for about 10 years, and the loss of Jamie, just when she died, everything died for me.
In other words, all the responsibility came on your shoulder?
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't keep up with the business. First of all, I couldn't work, period. I couldn't work. I couldn't do it.
Because of the shock?
Yeah. It destroyed me. Her death destroyed me. Her death was sudden, and it was tragic, and it was painful. And Jamie was everything to me. Jamie was everything. She was so much more than just a partner. She was my best friend. She was my wife. She was my partner in business. She was, You know, we went bowling together, and I made a fishing book album of us fishing. I taught her how to fish. She was good at it, too. She was really good at it. She never held a fishing pole in her life. And I taught her some basic stuff, and man, we had some great times. We had some great times. And when I lost her, put myself on a collision course with suicide. I didn't have the heart to take my own life, but I figured if I just did enough drugs and alcohol that I would just wither away.
So you were that ill at ease with yourself, with the business, with losing her, so you thought you lost everything.
Oh, I knew I did.
You knew you did.
I knew I did. It was over for me. I had thrown in the towel. I had thrown in the towel.
Well, on the next segment, we will take up where you left off and how you got and how we met. Because I remember meeting your mother and father. They took you to this place that we were called Pivot Ministries.
Yes.
And from that point on to this point on, I want to go for the second segment and invite you back for number 2.
You got it.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everything that you listen to. I hope you get a lesson of what it is to be desperate and what it is really to be down on your luck because of certain circumstances that hinder you. Thank you very much for listening. Shalom. Peace to you all.